What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. Well, it was certainly a wild weekend with news stories breaking all over the place from different outlets that Nintendo was going to be missing their internal targets they had set for their next generation device launch. And while I did cover some of this in a story over the weekend, there's more stuff that's kind of broken since then, which includes some contradicting info and even the effects of all these stories on Nintendo when it comes to their business side. We're going to go over that though here today. Also, we are going to be revisiting that rumor around Respawn working on a first-person shooter Star Wars game, as we got more information as to exactly what this game is. And we'll also be talking about Crazy Taxi, because it appears this reboot might be bigger than we were expecting. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure that like button helps out a ton. And if new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And of course, all members for the channel get Newswave early and ad-free. If you want to learn more about that, click the join button down below this video to find out more. And we're going to start today with Helldivers 2, which has been absolutely crushing it online when it comes to concurrent player count, and then also absolutely crushing it when it comes to just trying to get in and play the game. In fact, it's now to the point where when I try to log in, I can't on the PS5. It just says servers are at capacity and it restarts like a 20-second timer over and over and over again. And I feel like I'm not the only one seeing that screen based on a lot of the messages online. In fact, we can see this was posted up over the weekend over on the Helldivers 2 forum. And this is from Arrowhead developers, where they say their team is working around the clock to solve these issues, and they've had to cap their concurrent players to around 450,000 to further improve server stability. We look to work with our partners to get the ceiling raised. Yeah, the problem right now is, well, Steam last night hit 400,000 concurrent players, so it's just, they don't have enough room for everyone to log in and play, and it's a game that needs to be connected to the internet. There's no offline mode at all for this one, so it's a shame because the game is good, but you can't recommend, like, I can't tell anyone to go out and buy it right now because you can't even play it. So for me, I basically have it on the shelf waiting for them to fix these server issues. They certainly were not prepared for the amount of interest around this game, especially seemingly on PC. I do wonder if it only launched on the PlayStation 5, if they would have been able to handle it, but certainly with the PS5 and PC together day one is a bit too much for them. Also, we have a bit of an update on the xCloud side of things, specifically being able to stream games that you own that maybe aren't in Game Pass, because that is one big limitation currently of the service. In order to stream games, it has to be in like the Game Pass subscription. Well, we can see this posted up. This is over on Windows Central, who's citing, as we can see here, Hazard Gaming. And what's odd about this is the news is coming from, and I'm not kidding, a person who messaged Phil Spencer on Xbox saying any word or update on being able to play my own games on xCloud, and Phil says should be later this year. So it still seems strange, right, for Phil to be answering people through Xbox messages. I know that one of the big criticisms, which does sound kind of weird, but still, I understand it, is that there is maybe Xbox executive stuff getting a little too close to the community at times. They end up saying things that comes back to haunt them. So at this point, hopefully this is something that does happen later this year, because it is something you would expect to be there with Microsoft, who's supposed to be like one of the leaders for cloud in general, cloud gaming for titles that you have, we'll say, entitlements to, as that's what they call them now, not necessarily ownership. I think is something that's an absolute must. So we'll see, I guess, if they're able to launch it at some point this year. Otherwise, we'll come back and check out the Xbox messages that Phil is sending around. Oh, and we may have some good news here for Dragon's Dogma 2 fans who maybe want to play the game a bit earlier than at least the March 22nd release, which feels forever away right now with some of the games coming out next month. But check this out. This was found and posted up, this over on their subreddit, saying a potential demo from SteamDB. The reason they're noticing this is because it was updated with different packages for the app, one of them being free on demand. That was posted up a few days ago, and that makes people think, okay, maybe that would be a demo of some kind. Also playing into the idea that Capcom likes to put out demos for their different games, and I think this will be good because the performance is kind of questionable right now, specifically on different consoles, and I guess also on PC, depending on what kind of video card and processor and just configuration you have. So yeah, I think it'd be great if we got any kind of demo out there, because Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen, good game. I don't think a lot of people are necessarily familiar with Dragon's Dogma or have even played it. So a demo might get some hype going and people interested in it all over again because, of course, surprise, surprise, your character wakes up with amnesia, so you don't technically have to play the first one. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with some of the updates around this Nintendo next generation situation that absolutely exploded online over the last couple of days, basically because it sounds like at least the running idea currently is that Nintendo won't have their next-gen system, or their Switch 2, as of course has been dubbed, for 2024 and would fall into sometime 2025. So this, again, started to make the rounds out of PH Brazil, and then other outlets just started to pick it up and then corroborate it further. And in fact, Bloomberg, which we can see from Takashi Machizuki here, says the successor to the popular Switch was targeted for release at the end of this year. However, several publishers have now been told to expect it to slip into next, according to the people, who asked not to be named since the device hasn't been announced. Here, I think, is the key sentence that we have to keep in mind going into some of the other stories here. Nintendo has told some publishing executives not to expect the console until March 2025 at the earliest. To me, that signals that this system could just outright miss their current fiscal year, as that ends March 31st, 2025. Now, on the flip side here, Nash Weedle did post up over on X, saying the alleged leak does not come from Nintendo to hunt down insiders, as has been said, and for now, 2 developers confirmed me that they have not received the internal communication for Switch 2 in 2025. Now again, Nash Weedle, grain of salt, that sort of thing here, but it is interesting because this information sounds like it's coming from third-party publishers, not necessarily Nintendo first-party internal studios, right? So it is interesting that line of communication, Nintendo maybe having them position their games in certain ways as opposed to this is when the system itself is coming out. But either way, of course, Bloomberg, Takashi Machizuki, also got some quotes from different analysts, and this is all kind of leading into the big thing for Nintendo that happened actually Monday morning, technically, in Japan, but this we can see posted up again over on Bloomberg. Now, it seemed like he was quoting Dr. Serkin Toto, says Nintendo is likely looking at a pretty dry pipeline this year. The company will still try to keep the blockbusters for the next console. Yeah, I mean, if you look at their lineup now, sure, we have Princess Peach Showtime. That's coming up next month. That is a brand new game. Outside of that, though, if you look around, I mean, Metroid Prime 4, again, floating out there somewhere. And you know what? I wouldn't be shocked if this new system doesn't make it out for 2024. That Metroid Prime 4 doesn't either, and that ends up being a 2025 game. But otherwise, it's remasters, remakes, and believe it or not, I think Nintendo still is probably going to announce a couple more of those, whether it's, there's been a Fire Emblem remake that's been rumored for quite some time. The Twilight Princess Wind Waker bundle, it kind of makes me think we're going to have a solid 8 to 10 months from Nintendo of just remasters and remakes, trying to fill the gap that might be bigger or wider than Nintendo was originally planning it to be. And because this news got out there, of course, and Bloomberg covered it, again, very important to note that, well, we can see this was recorded and posted up. This again over on Bloomberg, Takashi Machizuki was on this one right away, saying the shares dropped as much as 8.5% in Tokyo on Monday. This is Nintendo's biggest intraday decline in a year. So if you've ever wondered why Nintendo at times will react or comment on certain stories and just refute them, because remember, that happened with Bloomberg. Nintendo came out on Twitter at the time and said, no, this story is not correct about, it was like margins and different things for their Switch OLED. Not the case, carry on. They haven't yet, although again, all this kind of broke over the weekend, so maybe Nintendo does say something, although I'm going to assume they won't, but when you see your stock get hit that hard, you kind of understand why Nintendo is vigilant with some of these stories, especially coming out of Bloomberg, because they legitimately can shift the market based on the stories that are getting out there. And considering that the stock market is very much forward-thinking and they like to try to price things in well ahead of time, it's very clear they're basically pricing in the idea that the Switch 2 won't be out this year for the holidays, which obviously would bring in a ton of revenue for Nintendo, but even further, might just miss their entire fiscal year, and that would be pretty bad for Nintendo from a business perspective. Doesn't mean Nintendo's going out of business, something like that, but it would hurt their overall revenue plans, their forecasts, and so forth there. And it would make for a pretty tough 2024, but then the rest of their fiscal year. So it's going to be interesting to see what Nintendo has in store for us, as there is still that partner direct that's apparently sometime this week. Yeah, apparently it was delayed because of the Microsoft thing. Almost like there's a Microsoft game in there or something. They're going to put Pentiment in the partner direct. I guess maybe we'll find out later on this week, but I wouldn't expect them to address anything with the Switch 2 next generation plans there, but eventually they'll have to start talking, and the next place would most likely be with their investors in May, or maybe they just try to say something next month in March, as that is still apparently rumored to be happening, so we'll see. Next up, let's talk about that new Star Wars game that Respawn is apparently working on. And this first came way of Tom Henderson at Insider Gaming, as he kind of mentioned it in passing on X, but he has followed up with it with their exclusive story. We can see the headline here, where they say Respawn is developing a first-person Star Wars Mandalorian game. They say, according to sources, the game will see the player take control of a Mandalorian bounty hunter, unclear who, set during the time when the Galactic Empire is dominating across the galaxy. It's your job as a bounty hunter to capture bounties, dead or alive, for cash rewards. They say, while it's unclear when the game will be released, it was said we're still a year or two away at the very least. It's currently unclear if the game will have a multiplayer experience or not. And there's actually quite a few details in here, as they also sourced Jeff Grubb. He kind of talked about this previously as well. But it sounds like they're trying to make a very fast-paced bounty hunter style game. It's mentioned again, it kind of in first person view, although it could technically kind of be like Indiana Jones, where first person to third person, back to first person. But in this case, it seems like they're really tapping their experience with Titanfall. So, I mean, you can just play a Titanfall 2 trailer now and kind of get you the idea of the sort of speed that you'll be in for with this. As you're doing damage, apparently your health will replenish. You, of course, have access to all kinds of different gadgets and weapons. As you'd expect, you kind of watch The Mandalorian, you kind of get the idea there. But they did mention not planned as an open world style game, more of a linear style, which you could still have some open-ended areas in a game that is more or less level by level, just kind of telling a story from start to finish. And I actually don't mind that, because the open world games, while they can be good, more times than not, especially now, it's kind of like been there, done that. I've seen this before, so I don't mind a very more tight-knit experience going from start point A to point B and finish up. And the idea of playing off of the Mandalorian popularity is great, but it doesn't seem like it's going to follow that storyline at all. So I don't mind them doing kind of an original story. And you know what? The old Bounty Hunter game, if you remember back on like the PS2 and the GameCube, that was a pretty fun game. So I don't think it's going to necessarily play directly off of that, but I'm sure they'll pull some inspiration from that, maybe some from Republic Commando, obviously some from Titanfall, and put it all together and hopefully make a really cool Mandalorian Star Wars game that we'll, I guess, see in a couple of years. But hey, exciting stuff there, I'm sure, for Star Wars fans. Next up, let's talk about Skull and Bones, as it did come out last week, and it came out at a bargain price, I assume, of $70, because hey, it's a quadruple A game after all. Well, reviews weren't very favorable for this one, despite it being in development for what feels like forever at this point, rebooted multiple times, and we assume the only reason it exists at this time, and one's just canceled, is because of some deal that Ubisoft had with Singapore? But either way, we can see over on Metacritic, currently sitting at a score of 64. That's on 12 reviews, so it didn't really get many reviewers checking it out. I mean, you can see the user score. I didn't really put a lot of stock into that. I mean, it got absolutely obliterated at a 2.9. I do find it hard to believe that 283 people have played it, though, and left a review. But if we go over to the split, we can see 3 positive, 3 mixed, 3 negative. Let's see. The top score here is from the Try Hard Guides, giving it an 80, saying Skull and Bones offers the promise of adventure on the high sea, while the game focuses on a little hard on its naval warfare mechanics. They are nonetheless exciting and don't grow old quickly. All right, on the opposite end of the spectrum here, we have PC Invasion saying, instead of a gritty pirate game, Skull and Bones is a looter shooter on the high seas that keeps stepping on its own toes. I hope future seasons will transform into a game that's good for more than novelty ship battles. Now, some of the reviews I saw was just that, wow, this is not as good as Assassin's Creed Black Flag, and that came out again, feels like forever ago at this point, and they took the part of Black Flag that really set it apart and and people really enjoyed, and somehow made it into its own complete game, but worse. It's actually incredible to think about that. Now, I will say, some reviews were basically like, this game just feels average. Like, it's not a terrible game, it's not a great game, it's somewhere in the middle, but because of the expectations built up around it, the quadruple A status, the $70 price tag, the long development, yeah, it's not going to live up to any of that, and it comes in as a game that is very underwhelming and probably a wait for a sale for many people. I look at this and I kind of think of what could have been when they showed things like when you raid a pirate ship and you just kind of watch stuff happen. I then think back to jumping on different boats in Assassin's Creed and taking it over that way. Manually, obviously, control your character. It's just, it seems like they were so fixated on just the boat side, they didn't think to just, I don't know, let you run around as an actual pirate. But I guess there is one silver lining to this whole situation. Skull and Bones has actually released, which means we don't have to worry about hearing or seeing it in a Ubisoft Forward or a Summer Game Fest or any other event. We can finally move on from Skull and Bones because something tells me Ubisoft probably will in less than a year. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about Crazy Taxi, as it is seeing a full reboot, and it's alongside of multiple other titles. That includes Golden Axe, Jet Set Radio, and others. Apparently there are even a few they haven't announced yet. Crossing my fingers right now for Comic Zone, but we'll see. Anyway, it does appear that Crazy Taxi might be a bit larger than we thought. We can see this is posted up. This was an article written by Japan Times, and they appeared to be checking in on a support studio with Sega. That's Sapporo Studio. They talked to the president, Takaya Segawa, says, "We're responsible for titles such as Phantasy Star Online 2 New Genesis and Hatsune Miku Colorful Stage in cooperation with the bases in Tokyo and overseas. We are also participating in the development of AAA titles, including Crazy Taxi." Huh, okay. They say at present, we don't have any titles developed independently by the studio, but we intend to do so in the future. Okay, so they're running support on AAA titles like Crazy Taxi, which is very impressive, although I guess that's technically one less capital A than Skull and Bones, but still, Crazy Taxi being this AAA project, which generally that reflects the budget going into it, is interesting. I'm picturing Crazy Taxi now, right, on the Dreamcast. Very fun arcade experience. I'm trying to wonder how Sega grows that further. How do they turn that into this big AAA budget feeling game without getting too far away from what makes Crazy Taxi so fun, and that is the crazy aspect to it. It is a game you just jump in, you play a few rounds, and then maybe you pass the controller to a friend who tries, or you just turn the system off and you got 15 or 20 minutes in. So maybe they'll have actual, like, full-on characters that build throughout, and they have relationships, open world, there's RPG mechanics. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out what they do to build this out more, and that is actually very exciting because it also makes me think of things like Jet Set Radio, which I would have to assume, out of all of these reboots that they're doing, is their flagship title. So if Crazy Taxi is a AAA game, maybe Jet Set Radio will match with Skull and Bones and be quadruple A. I can't wait till all these capital letters get out of gaming, because it is getting very, very tiresome. And before we go to the comments of the day, we're gonna take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday. We're asked, which of these March releases are you most looking forward to? Okay, Dragon's Dogma 2 at the top, kind of as expected, but then Princess Peach Showtime, Rise of the Ronin, South Park Snow Day, and Unicorn Overlord, which, hey, that got 10% of the vote. That's not bad for a Vanillaware game. However, it's really funny to think that the top 3 vote getters here are all coming out on the same day in March 22nd. It's like, come on, guys, you couldn't have just even just one. Okay, I can figure it out if 2 games released on the same day, but all 3 of those really March 22nd. I guess the 3 of them I'm most interested currently in Dragon's Dogma 2, although it was kind of a toss-up between that and Rise of the Ronin, and then Princess Peach Showtime. Well, I'll see how reviews go, and maybe I'll get to it at some point. But yeah, really locked in right now on Dragon's Dogma 2. Hopefully we do get that demo. Just want to see how it runs. And we'll finish up with the comments of the day. We'll start with this one here. This is posted up from Adrian. It says, dude, this week's Nintendo Partner Showcase was epic. I mean, it hasn't happened yet this week, but the story, of course, that was put out there, it's a very convenient story, obviously, is that it was delayed because of Microsoft's show that happened that was spur of the moment. Microsoft show was not supposed to have happened, their podcast this past week, but they had to move it up because of all the stuff that was going on online, and Nintendo graciously pushed their partner showcase to this week, which sounds ridiculous, but what if that actually happened? What if that was really the case? And what if the reason they did that is because there's a Microsoft first-party game in the Direct, and they wanted to get ahead of it and explain it because of all the discourses happening online. That would be something. But hey, I guess we'll see sometime this week, Partner Direct, and maybe Microsoft's logo will show up there. And then we'll take a look at a comment from the members video. We can see this was posted up. This was by Sebastian, who says, I mean, if Xbox wanted to create an Xbox handheld, they surely needed to partner with the ROG Ally guys, right? Because if not, Xbox would be tasked with creating a new handheld that is at the very least Series S level in performance and tech, and that must be extremely expensive and an even smaller form factor. But if it came from a partner company, they in turn would have a little bit more leeway with devs. I feel like Microsoft is just going to engineer their own handheld. They have a Surface team, obviously, that works on smaller devices. I think Microsoft can handle it, and that'll allow them to kind of build it from the ground up with AMD, or I don't know, maybe that's something for next generation and they do go full ARM and NVIDIA, or there are a lot of things moving behind the scenes, I'll say, with Microsoft, but let's just say they want to try a handheld. AMD probably has a chip ready to go. It could be that Z1, could be something else, and in that case, they'd also be able to build the OS up alongside of the hardware, and I think deliver a true, we'll say, quote-unquote, Xbox-like experience, so that it basically just looks like your Xbox Series X or S, that dashboard, when you load it up, and you'll have access to all of your Game Pass titles. But yeah, I do hope that Microsoft attempts a handheld because I think it could actually be pretty cool. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. Was Nintendo potentially missing this year to launch their next generation device falling into 2025? Or what about that rumored Mandalorian game? Would you be interested in checking that out? And then Crazy Taxi. How does Sega take that to the AAA level? What do you think they have to add into the original game? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.